Stisborsis Fublog. WordPress. Billy Meier.
Explained by the Billy Meier contacts. Mysteries, myths, legends, conspiracy theories, historical inaccuracies, and more. Compiled by David Chance, revised October 18, 2023.
Death, Dying, Afterlife, Death Life, and Reincarnation Part 2. Contact Report 704 Question 12 Answer. In the year 3999, all the spirit forms of all the members or faithful of the mission who have worked in it and have worked themselves up into the evolutionary level set by the level Arahat Athasata will leave the earth and reincarnate in new personalities in a higher evolutionary humanity of another world. These new personalities will continue their evolutionary path as wise human beings, whose spirit forms will one day, according to the creative law of evolution, enter the High Council level, and then the Arahat Athasata level. Contact Report 707.
The Pleiaren as very distant descendants of their very early ancestors from the lineage of the primordial annunciator Nakademion, therefore, come from the Ankar dimension into the Dern universe, that is to say, into the Dern dimension, or just into the Dern space-time structure, and thus also to Earth. This is because a large number of their early ancestors settled on the Earth planet millions of years ago, and then also died there, whereby their spirit forms are still reborn on the Earth world over many reincarnations and animate human beings, whose development the Pleiaren strive for.
Contact Report 710.
A rebirth of an Earth human being cannot be possible because only his spirit form is classified as reincarnation. Consequently, only a new personality can be born, not reborn, which has an entirely different individuality, a different appearance, a different form, as well as an absolutely different nature and other peculiarities than these factors were inherent in the old and deceased personality.
Contact Report 711.
This is well known to us Pleiaren, and we also know through the teaching of Nakademion that in order to be above all susceptibility and backsliding into the old negative patterns of degenerations, violence, wars, hatred, falsehood and wickedness, etc., it takes much more than just the change to peace, freedom, justice, and righteousness, etc. in the human being, and that all this cannot simply be worked out through the normal development of understanding, reason, intelligence, and knowledge. But this very much more is only possible for a human being, no matter who, how, what, and from where he is, whether from Earth, from our Pleiaren planets, or elsewhere, when very thoroughly and intensively throughout all times it is learned to perceive reality and the truth contained therein, and to implement all the resulting knowledge for self and self-development in a correct, positive, and evolutionary way. And the comprehensive realization which gradually matured in all the human beings of our Pleiaren populations also led to the realization of the fact that all becoming of all natural creative flourishing requires long periods of time, which in this respect led all Pleiaren peoples to the realization and understanding that they would never stop learning, but would have to learn all their lives and keep on learning, because learning would never come to an end, but would continue endlessly, and also in every new life in relation to every new personality. So it became clear and understandable that learning must never end and therefore must always continue in each new life of each new personality for many millennia, decades, thousands, centuries, thousands, and millions of years until the eventual entrance into the higher planes of the High Council and higher. But this also meant, and this was recognized in the course of time, that throughout all the times that the human being incarnates again and again as a new personality and exists and lives as a material life form, he must endlessly learn and keep on learning, which is why he, as a learning human being, will also never be immune from making mistakes again and again in order to learn from them and to continue everything better and learning positively. However, this was also connected with the realization that as a result of the lifelong learning process of each new personality, there was also the danger and possibility, connected with and timeless throughout all new incarnations and new personalities, of falling back into the old behavior patterns of earlier personalities, despite each higher development achieved.
Contact Report 715.
Therefore, ontologically seen, or from the point of view of the entire being, with regard to material constitutions of all life forms, there is none that could not fall back into old negative evil or positive good norms. However, this backsliding must be understood in such a way that it refers to the inner character impulses that exist in a negatively degenerated form and have not yet been overcome, worked through, or neutralized. And this is fundamentally the case with all life forms, because all living beings, as a result of their natural behavior with regard to their will to live and their will to self-preservation, develop from the ground up combative forms or impulses, urges, and drives. It is these that, depending on the life form, became fixed in the innermost character block or instinct block ages ago, and became a fixed component, but which, likewise depending on the life form, develop specifically. In the case of higher life forms, which are capable of a conscious higher development of consciousness, this does not regulate itself, but fundamentally only through an independent, conscious mental learning function appropriate to understanding, reason, and intelligence. Only through this is it possible for the life form, and in this respect I am speaking of the human being, to tame, transform, dissolve, and neutralize the impulses fixed in its innermost character, which it has created and fixed in itself in a degenerate way as evil and violence, etc., also itself in a conscious way. This, however, is a very long process, and even after death affects all new personalities again and again, for each new personality is only able to process and neutralize an extremely small part of its degenerations, which are glowing in the innermost character during the entire lifetime of its material body. The whole process of complete dissolution up to the time when the human being is no longer born as a new personality with a physical or material body lasts until only the evolutionized and all-embracing spirit form remains, and no more material body can be born. And the fact that this process of dissolving all the degenerations fixed in the innermost character takes such an infinitely long time in order to process, dissolve, and neutralize them is due to the fact that these impulses of inner degenerations break through again and again in all life forms. So also in the human being, in every new life with every personality. Consequently, they are also lived outwardly. In this way, however, the degenerations that are lived out externally are perceived and also absorbed by fellow human beings, and thus infiltrate them, whereby they are caught up again by their old negative, evil, and violent ways, and become addicted to them again or relapse.
Contact Report 721.
As you know, dear friend, early ancestors of you Play-Aren emigrated to this earth, and many of them also died here on this planet, as a result of which their forms of creation or their spirit forms have since reincarnated again and again on Earth in new personalities. And this is still the case today and tomorrow as well as the day after tomorrow and in the far future, because for the earlier emigrants from the Ankar universe or space-time structure, precisely for the Plei-Aren emigrants at that time, it was determined that their distant and most distant descendants should be taught until far into the future with regard to the teaching of truth, teaching of the energy of creation, teaching of life.
Contact Report 770.
The human being thus does not recognize the meaning of his or her life, and consequently orients their way of life according to what is lied to him or her by the religious representatives. Many human beings therefore deal with death in their faith and believe in a heaven and a hell in which they are supposed to end up one day according to their way of life.
Contact Report 799 Death, decapitated.
We recently talked in the kitchen of the center about the fact that after the actual death of the human being, the consciousness continues to work for 15 to 20 minutes, and namely in such a way that it still perceives everything that is happening all around it. This, however, is only in terms of perception, without the consciousness still maintaining own thoughts, but thus rather only taking in perceptions, something which cannot be ascertained by our medics, etc. The whole phenomenon could perhaps be compared to a kind of tape recorder, which records everything but is not able to reproduce any sound, because it happens to run soundless when it is played back. This is how it happens, and namely also when beheading takes place, or when the human being dies in some other way, in an accident or the like. Svath explained that only in the completely switched-off state of conscious perception matters would be different. Namely then, when during the dreamless deep sleep the death would occur and the consciousness would completely run dry. Then, as he explained, the perception would also be present, but would be such that it would only take in emptiness. About 20 or more years ago, we talked about the fact that after death, the consciousness can still perceive everything that can be noted by it for 15 to 20 minutes. The consciousness in a severed head or the consciousness of a decapitated human being still perceives what is happening for 15 to 20 minutes. Admittedly, it is only a kind of unconscious perception without being able to consciously think about it, just as it cannot be medically determined that the consciousness still perceives everything in the underground, so to speak, during this time.
Contact Report 824 excerpt from the introduction to a new book being written at the time by Billy. Lehre der Schöpfungsenergie, Teaching of Creation Energy in the Endless Void and the Endless Duration, which are called nihilo, that is to say nothing. Nothing exists, consequently not even a nothing is given, which cannot be comprehended by the very earth human and very limited mind, as well as by its reason, and consequently cannot be understood. In his short thinking, despite his megalomania, that he is the crown of creation, he is still far from being able to comprehend and understand what reality, and its truth effectively is. Thus he also does not understand, and it is not even possible for him to comprehend, that a nihilo, that is to say nothing, can be in non-existence, and that something can develop from it. Namely the form of an energy, which in turn is able to stimulate something else, from which something is able to develop. But this non-existence can be equated, for example, with the state of death, which is invisible, not perceptible, and not present in such a way that it can be seen, grasped, heard or felt. Nevertheless, it is omnipresent and can occur at any time, without being seen by human beings themselves, although it can be recognized, that is to say ascertained at present as existence. It is undoubtedly omnipresent, real and active, but in such a way that it can only be detected by human beings when a living being is afflicted by death, that is to say has died, and its life function has ceased to be active. The human being sees the dead body, but not the energy death itself, so that this energy remains invisible and intangible, as well as inexplicable to him. Contact Report 829.
I know that, just as I know that there is no karma, but that this is absolute nonsense and a religious assertion that is not true, because there is no rebirth that would bring such things with it, because a completely new personality is born that has no relevance to the last, that is to say previous one before the human being just died.
Contact Report 864.
Of course, human beings can and should remember the deceased, especially those who were loved, but it should not lead to a mental and emotional burden, because life also goes on and has to be dealt with when a loved one is suddenly no longer there, when a loved one dies, and thus a final physical separation takes place. All mourning does not help, but only reason and understanding that it is done and cannot be changed, not even if there was a very close connection and the grief seems almost unbearable. It is said that time heals all wounds, so with understanding and reason, every sorrow will also once pass so far that it is no longer permanently present, but only comes up now and then in a completely unburdening way if somehow a memory brings it up. If, however, human beings do the opposite, that is to say, they grieve constantly and cannot detach themselves from the grief, then this leads to an evil state of mind, which may end in suicide. Consciously develop and use love, knowledge, wisdom and feeling for others. German language pamphlet, Knowledge G, Wisdom and Feeling for Others. If knowledge and wisdom are developed, especially through the teaching of the truth, teaching of the spirit, teaching of the life, then both of these values show the way to another mode of existing, namely, to the death life and to the rebirth of the spirit form, as well as to a new life through the birth of a new consciousness with a new personality. Decalogue du Decalogue 2017. English translation, page 182. Nothing ends with the death, least of all, the life, because death means only a station of the continuance in the striving of all creatures and creations, existence and evolution, and therefore a continuance of which one does not have to cast aside as affliction and suffering, in order to press thereupon to no longer have to possess a physical body, in order to finally live as a glorious master of a higher degree in higher spheres, in order to be able to loftily judge over the poor confused ones remaining behind on the earth, because these are too lowly intelligent and stupid in order to be able to obtain the sublimity themselves. What imbecility coined purely by humans, because aging means evolving, and death means a volitive transition to new life, and consequently, to new striving. Death means continuity in new, powerful life, whose sense, once again, lies in the striving for that which is higher and for the highest possible relative absolute fulfillment in the unstoppable progressing evolution of creational natural imprint, given to all life and all existence through the creational evolution principle. Death means life, and therefore this requires no death dogmas and no survival beyond life dogmas. The truth, namely, is very much simpler than what the human brains have contrived and fantasized since time immemorial through false philosophies and religious sectarian irrational teachings. The sense of the life is evolution, and so therefore, striving for that which is higher and more absolutely fully developed. And therefore, life does not mean suffering and affliction, but rather fulfillment through striving. Therefore, however, the death also does not mean suffering and affliction, change in the becoming and passing of the endless rebirth to a new, powerful, striving, evolving life. Death, in turn, means new life, and death means striving, advancement, higher development, evolution in the following of the creational development principle. Every single rationally capable Visin is born in order to evolve, thereto compelled and driven by the creational impulse of the striving for that which is higher, more rational and more absolutely fully developed, and every single rationally capable Visin is integrated into the laws of the reincarnation, of the rebirth. A process of the endless change in the becoming and passing and again becoming of the reincarnation process. Thus there are unendingly many lives to live in evolutive, striving form before one day, after 60 to 80 million years. Every evolution state is reached, through continuous striving for that which is higher and more absolutely fully developed, whereby the physical body changes and slowly becomes a pure fine fluid form, which slowly changes itself into the pure spirit form. If false philosophies, religions, sectarianism and false worldviews were able to ascertain the false immortality dogma and the death dogma elsewhere, thus, for example, through the truth of the continued existence of the life through the death and its striving for new life, then all ardent fervor for gods, saints, masters, gurus, and sublime ones, as well as for swindlers and deceivers and sick ones like channelers, mediums, contactees, emissaries of gods, enlightened ones, mediums for the dead, Jesus' mouthpieces and all holy ones, exorcists and priests of all kinds, etc., would quickly grow cold and vanish. However, this can only then occur when the human being finally becomes rational and willing to comprehend and acknowledge the pure creational truth of the teaching of the Spirit, and namely in such a wise that he or she also actually recognizes this creational truth and teaching through his or her own fathoming thought work, as well as knowledge and truth ascertainment. Thereby, room would be made for a total disinterest towards all delusional thinking and towards all false philosophical, religious, sectarian, irrational teachings, dogmas, and enticements. If the confused ones and fanatics and the other followers of false philosophies, religions, and sects could and were able to recognize the truth that life and death are an unceasing striving for continuous new life and for that which is higher and more absolutely fully developed, then they would also recognize the truth of the striving, in the progress of which there is never an end and can never be an end because the evolution unstoppably progresses, and never finds an end even in the highest of all highest, and in the most absolutely fully developed of all that which is absolutely fully developed, so therefore, not even in the absolute absolutum. Therefore, nothing can fall prey to a final death, because all and everything of all existence and all creation, in the entire presence of the unending being, is integrated into the reality of the eternal existence. Therefore, there is no possibility of a final death state, and consequently, a state of obliteration, because the striving of all existence and all creatures itself proves that absolutely no end exists, neither in any form of the evolution nor in the being. However, the human being must himself or herself recognize and himself or herself comprehend, and therefore prove this creationally given truth to himself or herself through the exploration of the knowledge and the truth within himself or herself, and through its recognition. Only thereby is he or she able to recognize that the death means no destruction, no final dissolution, and no elimination. A fact from which results that the life, in and of itself, possesses immortality, in contrast to all pathologically dumb contrary claims of all existing false philosophies, false worldviews, religions, and sects that attempt to prove an impossibility of the immortality of the life. Page 218. All existing life is also creation. Creation is the universe, the celestial bodies and all life of fauna and flora and every life, the becoming and passing and the life in general. Thus, the creation is therefore also contained, pulsating and existing in everything living, even in the death, which only represents a different dimensioned form of the life. Even therein, the creation is existing, because the death is also pulsated through by the creation, and is creation itself, like every other life, whichever kind and form and dimension it is. Discussion Board of FIGU, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier. Answered, Archives, 2001, Thomas Howe.
Oh, very briefly, could you describe what the average Earth human experiences between lives?
That's not possible, because we don't remember and we don't have the words to describe it. No personality exists anymore, and therefore no thoughts as we are familiar with in our lifetime. It's the spirit form and the comprehensive consciousness block, Gesamtbewusstseinsblock, that enter the beyond. The spirit form and the comprehensive consciousness block, analyses, some reviews. Aufarbeiten, what has not been digested, assimilated prior to death. Love, wisdom, etc. are transformed into a fine matter form. The former personality is dissolved and transformed into neutral energy. Then a new personality is worked out, developed, which incarnates, together with the spirit form, into an embryo at the 21st day after conception. The new personality has nothing in common with the former one. Discussion Board of FIGU, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier. Answered. Archives 2001 http://ce on forum. Figu. Org us messages 12/2685. HTML 10682394 POST 5107. Scott B. Can hypnosis be used to uncover past lives on other planets besides planet Earth? No. Discussion board of Figu, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier. Answered. Archives 2001 http chach forum. Figu. Org us messages 12/2685. HTML 10682394 post 5776. Mark Campbell.
Oh. Is there a new calculation for reincarnating lives in the present time? I assume that spirits are coming back into new lives sooner than the standard lifetime plus 1/2. Because of overpopulation.
Yes, they are coming back sooner. Discussion board of Figu, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier answered. Archive through January 28, 2003 http QR forum. Figu, org CGI bin us discus. CGI PG next on topic Dino Adis Fayi, 2686 post near 4 Sendero, Thomas Hall.
Oh. I would like to ask what types of information carry over into future incarnations, for example. Spiritual only? Or maybe also aptitudes such as for art or science?
Nothing is carried over to the next incarnation. Personality. The only thing that is inherited is genetic information from the parents. Discussion board of Figu, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier. Answered. Archive through July 26, 2003 http forum. Figu, org us messages 123391. HTML 04203 post 0242 Loni Morto.
Concerning reincarnation, after the death and the time we spend in the beyond, do we come back in the next life, within a 1,000-mile radius of where we died? Or can we come back anywhere on the planet?
It is not we who come back into a new incarnation, but it's an entirely new personality who has nothing in common with the former user of the spirit form. As a rule, people are reincarnated into the same culture, race, or nation, etc., where they died. This means that, for example, an Afro-American person in the USA will incarnate as an Afro-American person again in the USA and not in Africa. And if a German-speaking Swiss person dies, he will incarnate again somewhere in Switzerland, Austria, Germany, or Liechtenstein, etc. In other words, a spirit form will not incarnate in France, then in Tibet, in Nigeria, and in Greenland, etc., etc. Incarnations occur within the group of people and cultures where one lived and thought in one's former life. Discussion board of Figu, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier answered. Archive through July 25, 2003 http chach forum. Figu, org CGI bin us discus. CGI PGI next to enter topic reun 2n page 3391 post 49 Joseph Emmanuel.
In answer to a question posed to you from this discussion board recently, you said that, as a rule, people are reincarnated into the same culture, race or nation where they died, emphasizing as an example that an Afro-American in the USA will reincarnate as an Afro-American again in the USA and not in Africa. Then you said, a spirit form will not reincarnate in France, then in Tibet, then Nigeria. Incarnations occur within the group of people and cultures where one lived and thought in one's former life. If this is so, how is it that your spirit has reincarnated as a Jew in Israel, then an Arab in Saudi Arabia, Mecca, and then as a Swiss in Switzerland? This seems to contradict the answer you have given.
And Christian Freiner.
This is no contradiction because there wasn't a big difference between the civilizations, etc., of Palestine and Arabia or India at that time. The reincarnations followed the path of the spreading knowledge across to Europe during a time period of many hundreds of years, and several incarnations. Perhaps it's wise now to give some additional information regarding Billy's earlier explanations. The explanations which you quoted above are directed to meant for persons who are not yet familiar with the laws of reincarnation. It's a simplified explanation. Actually, reincarnation doesn't depend on the skin color, but on the education and civilization and evolutional level of a person, a group of persons, peoples, nations, etc. From this follows that, as an example, a white US American person may reincarnate as a black US American person, and vice versa. And an educated European scientist will not reincarnate in the Amazon jungle among a native tribe, etc. And a person who strongly or fanatically believes in Islam or Jewish faithom, Jewish who lives in Arabia or Israel, etc., will not incarnate into a well-educated family in Sweden or Holland, etc. What really matters regarding reincarnation is the level of evolution of understanding, knowledge, freedom of thinking, culture, etc. of a person, both on a personal level and also regarding the surrounding society. The average level of evolution marks civilization of a nation, has an influence on the location of incarnation of a spirit form. An average Swiss person, or rather his spirit form, who is accustomed to more or less freedom of speech, democracy, security, welfare, pluralism, etc., will not reincarnate in Arabia or some other country where religion has a strong hold on the everyday life of the citizens. As a rule, the more religious a nation is, the more opposed to progress it is, and the less evolved with regard to civilization, technique, etc. it is. Discussion board of FIGU, the mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier answered. Archive through October 30th, 2003. http forum. FIG. Org CGI bin os discus. CGI. Pakken next on topic ashim. Southern page. Third vouch 4. Poster Averma 48. Car. Hey, how much say does our own spirit have in regards to selecting next incarnation? That is to say, is it our own spirit that decides and select next suitable incarnation, or is this being selected for it?
Our spirit doesn't have a say in this. The next incarnation is selected by way of natural, creational laws on a vibratory level. In our modern times, with the immense overpopulation, there has come a factor of disorder into the whole process. In other words, spirit forms have to incarnate again before the comprehensive consciousness block, Gesamtbewusstsein block, has completely dissolved the old personality and/or completed the new personality. From this results that so many human beings suffer from a variety of ailments, handicaps, problems, softness, proneness to drug addiction, etc., etc. Discussion board of FIGU, the mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier. Answered. Archive through February 01, 2005, http. Forum. FIGU. Org us messages 124200. Chairman post 112, Joseph Emmanuel.
When I consider the lives of certain individuals, such as those who are driven to succeed in becoming what they desire to be, it seems to me that the strength of will they possess to achieve their goal is insurmountable. I can't imagine that such a strong personality wouldn't have a major influence on future incarnations, particularly on that incarnation directly succeeding it. I would have thought that the spirit form of such an individual would reincarnate in the body of someone who is destined to live an equally notable life, within a similar, if not the same profession. My question is, therefore, Do the spirit forms of successful individuals reincarnate into lives that are destined to perform similar roles? For example, would the spirit form of someone in power reincarnate into the life of someone who's also likely to acquire a position of power?
No. An incarnation as a king can be followed by an incarnation as a beggar, and then as a shepherd, etc., etc. Discussion board of Figu, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier. Answered. Archive through April 26, 2005. http ich forum. Figu org us messages 125388. HML Lamortini Free Post 13 Joseph Emmanuel.
Well, following on from my last question to you, where I asked, do the spirit forms of successful individuals reincarnate into lives that are destined to perform similar roles? You answered, an incarnation as a king can be followed by an incarnation as a beggar, and then as a shepherd, etc. Having thought about this, it seems to me that the difference between a king and a beggar is, or can be, as enormous as the difference between a scientist and someone who is devoutly religious. Seeing as most beggars we see in the streets aren't able to rule over their own lives, let alone a country. This being the case, from the viewpoint of evolution, an incarnation as a king being followed by an incarnation as a beggar seems as absurd as an incarnation as a scientist being followed by an incarnation as someone who is devoutly religious. We know this isn't possible because of the difference in evolution between them. Yet not all beggars are the same. Some, I'm certain, have it in them to make something of themselves. And I'm also certain that if an incarnation as a king is ever followed by an incarnation as a beggar, he will be such a person, for otherwise I don't see how you can account for one's spiritual and conscious evolution, seeing as one grows stronger and wiser through a succession of incarnations that follow on from one another progressively. My question, therefore, is, if an incarnation as a king is followed by an incarnation as a beggar, will this person have it in himself to take control of his life for the better? Or will he remain a common beggar who doesn't have the strength of will to take control? Assuming the king was a strong-minded and determined man.
The former personality is not relevant to the one of the next, the actual incarnation. The consciousness-related development evolution is not based on the material things, but on knowledge and wisdom. Note by Christian Freener, in each incarnation the personality is once again free to decide about the course of one's life, namely through one's thoughts and actions. It's not the position a person is holding in a life, for example, the position of a director, king, farmer, etc., but the things the person is learning by leading the life and doing the job, etc. Discussion board of Figu, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier. Answered. Archive through April 26, 2005. http just forum. Figu. Org us messages 125388. HTML post 461.
Norberto.
If a religious person in current life discovers the truth about religion madness, truth about creation, etc., and in his or her next life is educated again in religion, is it a warranty that he or she is going to discover the truth again because of knowledge of his or her previous life?
The person is hit by impulses from the storage banks, and he or she will receive the impulses. These impulses may trigger, for example, doubts about the truthfulness of the religion a child is confronted by his parents. The breakthrough of the impulses will happen sooner or later in each life. If this process with the impulses would not happen, evolution would not be possible. All those persons who once had access to the truth will be linked to it, will find back to it. Discussion board of Figu, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier answered. Archive through April 26, 2005. http forum. Figa. Org us messages 125388. HTML 11457043 and post 14623. Joseph Emmanuel.
Well, Your answer to my last question stated that the consciousness-related development track evolution is not based on material things, but on knowledge and wisdom, with a note included by Christian Freiner saying that it isn't the position a person is holding in a life, but the things he is learning. Considering this answer, I feel my question has been misunderstood, as I was actually inquiring about one's conscious will, and not necessarily about one's material existence and status in life. I've always supposed that the will a human being possesses, originating from one's consciousness, is developed in strength from one incarnation to the next, and in this way affects each subsequent incarnation, even though the spirit form has an unconscious consciousness. But if you say the former personality is not relevant to the next incarnation, in the sense that they are completely unrelated even in consciousness, then it seems to imply that human beings gain nothing from their spiritual evolution, but that all wisdom and knowledge is purely for the benefit of the spirit.
Is this correct?
Yes, that's correct. The will does grow only if there is a consciousness-related evolution present. From this also the will is evolving. Only that which is stored is relevant for the next life, incarnation. If something negative is necessary to create something positive, then this is evolution increasing evolutive in German. Knowledge, wisdom, love, logic, freedom, and peace are decisive for the evolution in the next life transmitted as impulses. Discussion Board of FIGU, The Mission, Billy, Eduard Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive through June 6, 2005, http forum. FIGU. Org. Us. Messages. 125434. Jamel, Wemera or Sum 3KH post 44909.
Der Plotmak. Billy, can you with absolute certainty say that reincarnation is a law and that there is no punishment after death? Can one really be so sure about this? There is so many people that is afraid of the so-called hell, and it would be nice to know if you could guarantee this, and shortly explain why it really is so. Christian Freiner. But yes, Billy can really guarantee for that. Hell is not a place, but a state of mind consciousness and psyche related. And there is absolutely no punishment after death. Billy is sure about this because he knows. Discussion Board of FIGU, The Mission, Billy, Eduard Albert Meier, your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive, through July 02, 2005, HTTP forum.
Faro. Org. CGI bin. Us. Discuss.
CG. Per. Nächsten topic. Toiline page. 543. Post 732. Ja.
N. In your small brochure, ein Wort zu Mann und Frau. You write that, basically speaking, we are to notice that firstly are all embryos of female type.
A transformation to male ones, when it becomes male, follows first from the 8th to 10th week of pregnancy, namely through development of larger amount of hormone, for example testosterone. The question is, how can be the gender of a person in development for such a long time, 8 to 10 weeks of pregnancy, when the gender on chromosome level XXXY is determinated after impregnation?
The gender is not determined immediately after impregnation, but by the personality that enters the embryo together with the spirit form on the 21st day of pregnancy. It is the new personality that has been created by the comprehensive consciousness block Gesamtbewusstsein block that steers, directs the developing embryo in order to remain a female body or to become a male body. This process is made possible by the spirit's force power. The spirit form is responsible for the necessary impulses for this process, but the spirit form itself does not decide about the gender. It's the new personality and its aspects, goals, etc. that determine the gender of the developing baby human being. Discussion board of Figu, the mission, Billy, Eduard Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier. Answered. Archive through September 08, 2005. http shots forum. Figu, org US, messages 125536. HTML, Orlando 62599, postom 56 Frodo.
Robert? Oh. In the previous incarnations of my spirit form, neither Figu existed nor probably your spiritual form was incarnated as well, at least with tasks as a prophet. In my present life I was educated in a conventional way, Catholic religion included. Nevertheless, I have been able to identify, to recognize you, the Figu, and to understand that there are a lot of tasks to fulfill. And, of course, I abandoned the dangerous and delusional teachings of religion as well. My question is, how has it been possible that... also considering many previous lives probably spent in wrong teachings. It could seem something really difficult to happen. I know quite well that still there is a lot of hard work to do, and that this is just the very beginning, but that seems to be a good sign for the next incarnation of my spirit form.
If a person is meeting, finding the spiritual teachings, this means, as a rule, that there are already certain impulses stored and accepted in the storage banks, and that the person in a former life as another personality had experiences in the same line. If this process is somewhat intensive, the person caught impulses that led him into this direction. If the spiritual teachings are found encountered for the first time, the process, feelings, etc., is slower and not intensive. Discussion board of Figu, the mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier answered. Archive through August 28, 2006. http forum. Figu, org us, messages 126520. Chambal 256044 non post 217
Savi. Oh, supposing there is a person before he dies, he has a strong will and every reason of becoming a man again in his next life. My question is there any chance that this spirit will engage with an embryo with XX female chromosome? What would happen then?
Contrary to knowledge, wish factors Wunschfaktoren cannot be transferred into a next life. After the end of one's life, the personality is dissolved before an entirely new one is built up. The gender is determined by genetics alone. Discussion board of Figu, the mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier. Answered. Archive through December 25, 2006. http Toy forum. Figa. Org us messages 126822. Chamel 1675 post 24089.
Simo. Do thoughts of previous lives influence the birth of the next life? If not, then what decides what birth the spirit form would take in the next life?
This is a process of Fügung. There is no correct translation into English. This process cannot be influenced, steered. Procreation, fathering, etc. are playing a role, through which the new personality with the ego, consciousness, etc. is being created. Discussion board of Figu, the mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier. Answered. Archive through January 28, 2008. http forum. Figu. Org CGI bin us discuss. CGI, PGR previous topic. Twanin page. 92 post 31. Yentsiu.
Nor. Billy. In each new incarnation, I would imagine that we will have different likes, hobbies and professions, etc. than we did in the last lifetime, so it's very possible we will not find your teachings again. It would be nice to get some clarification on this from you.
If a person really lives according to the spirit teachings, or is really trying to live according to it, then the person will have a good chance to find to it in a next incarnation and take up the impulses. Everything depends on a person's interest. Discussion Board of Figu, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier, your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive through January 28, 2008, http, forum. Figu, org CGI ben us discus. CGI, PG sin previen topica, Twitchy 20 page. Dimidur post 3, Sierra.
Sure. Tor, the short human lifespan of 70 to 100 years, along with the overpopulation of the planet, puts the reincarnation process with a shorter duration period for the spirit. In this situation, many of the newer spirits evolving have less experiences and/or less time to review the life just left. Combined with a fast-changing world along with weaker family ties, the less experienced spirit enters back into a new personality with great challenges. My question is, will this cause the personality unusual characteristics that seem to compound the problems of our societies? I acknowledge that a well-structured family that raises a child correctly will have the strongest effect on the child's upbringing. It's the other child that is not as fortunate I am wondering about. Is this a receipt for a condition that will suddenly correct itself on a massive scale if allowed to continue to the natural threshold?
As long as there is overpopulation on Earth, there will be negative effects because human beings' spirit form and consciousness block are reincarnated too early. These negative effects can also occur in children who are born into well-structured families. Interpersonal relations are disturbed or even destroyed, and there are also effects on the environment and the planet itself. Discussion Board of Figu, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier, your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive through August 25, 2008, http forum. Figa, org, us, messages, 12-9294. Chimia, Totilwa 196F137 post 3436 Loni Morto.
Meier, since we are living in the most serious time in human history, it seems like a special kind of love is necessary in order to endure the difficult times in the future. Is it possible that some who are in true love relationships in past lives have been or will be reunited in this life after a promise was made to do so, thus bringing about a special kind of certainty in love?
Since there is always a new personality in each existence, incarnation, no exceptions, it is not possible that two persons can promise to meet each other again in a next existence to continue with a true love. There is no predetermination Vorbestimmung. The correct way to improve the future is by realizing the creational laws and commandments, and to live in line with them. Discussion Board of Figu, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier, your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive through September 26, 2008, http, forum. Figu, org, CGI bin, us, discus. CGI, PG next on topic 12 page, Seer 294 post 34990.
Nor. My dear Billy, this is hard to put in words, but I will give it a try. Right now I know that I am me. I know that I am not that other person sitting next to me, or that other person I see walking down the street, or that person on TV. I know that I am me. When I am reincarnated, will I know that I am an individual? I may not remember who I was in a past life, but will I know that I am a being looking out of the new being's eyes?
If a person is consciously evolving, he will always know that I am me. You as a person do not reincarnate. There will be an entirely new I that has no memory or knowledge about this, your present I. Discussion Board of Figu, The Mission, Billy Edward Albert Meier, your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive through October 26, 2008, http, forum. Figu, org views and messages in 129386. HML 22 post
Marcel. Hey, you have mentioned before that the spirit will reincarnate in the same culture and same level of evolution regarding knowledge. Wisdom, love. So the spirit will reincarnate in a group of affinity to preserve continuity in its evolution. But my question is, due to overpopulation, is it possible that this law is being broken and spirits are reincarnating in different groups of society that are not of the same level of evolution? In other words, spirits are being forced to be born in different locations, no education religious, where the spirit would suffer a setback?
No, spirit forms do still reincarnate in the same cultural and consciousness-related region, society. What is different is the periods of life and afterlife, the time the spirit form is dwelling in the beyond. Example: a spirit form of a Swiss person who has been educated in Switzerland will reincarnate again in the Western European region and not in the Sahara Desert region. But the spirit form of a person from Central Africa who has come to Switzerland as a child and has been educated in Switzerland and continues to live there may be incarnating again in Europe. Everything depends on the consciousness-related evolution. Discussion board of FIGU, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive through October 26, 2008, HTT, Chi-Forum. FIG, Orgus Messages 129386. HTML 22475736 or post 35 hoid.
Hector. Oh, the story of the Nocademian spirit form is quite fascinating. My question addresses the 144218 peoples that freely decided to contribute /assist his mission 12,000 million years ago. The normal evolutionary cycle of human beings include 40 to 80 million years up to the High Council level, and 6,000 to 8,000 million years to reach Arahat Athasada. There is something wrong with the evolutionary cycle of those Mortuam 4218, because it does not match the regular or normal evolutionary cycle. They all should have already reached High Council level. What happens to them, to the so-called Gasroin? Do they stay in the beyond for longer time between incarnations, in comparison to normal reincarnation cycles?
There have been long periods when that group of spirit forms had been laid on ice in a waiting position. However, this is a one-time exception, because all other spirit forms in our universe are evolving at normal speed, and are finishing their incarnation cycles much faster, and at normal speed. All the many descendants of those Getru have already entered the level of Arahat Atharsata and have lived through their normal evolutionary cycle. Discussion board of FIGU, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive through February 28, 2009, HTTP, Twatch Forum. FIGU, org, us, messages 129705. HTML 1235832337 post 3899.
Thomas? Yes. Hello, Mr. Meier. I would like to ask about reincarnation. It seems that for every scientific bit of knowledge that there is to discover, there are hints and bits of evidence in nature that lead us to that knowledge. It seems to me that is also the case for spiritual knowledge. However, in spite of the fact that reincarnation seems evident to me, I cannot seem to find any evidence for it in nature, since I cannot find any evidence that the spirit exists. I understand and feel that the spirit exists, but that is just a belief, since I don't actually know it exists. Is there anything in nature that is visible to average humans that points to the existence or likelihood of reincarnation? Thanks for your help and advice.
The easiest example is to observe plants that wither in winter and are growing anew in spring. Life is stored within the roots or the bulb. A tree that loses its leaves can be compared to the spirit form, and the new leaves and blossoms, etc., are the new personality and consciousness. The spirit can be observed in the fact that there is life. Discussion board of Figu, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier. Answered. Archive through March 30th, 2009 Topolsiwashin Forum. Figa. Org, CGI bin, AS, Discus. CGI PG share next and your topic chant to end page, 9705 post 39703.
Earthling. J. Regarding time spent in the beyond between material lives. Due to overpopulation, instead of 152 years between lives, what is the average time these days? And can spirit forms literally spend only hours, days, weeks or months before re-entering a fetus? Is there a formula based on the length of one's lifetime? If one lives only 20 years, will they generally spend less time in the beyond than one who lives to 80?
The average time of 152 years between lives is just a ratio, based on a life that had a duration of 100 years. Due to overpopulation, this ratio is put out of function, and therefore no statements can be made regarding the length of a spirit form's period in the beyond. Therefore, if we take your example, the spirit form of that person who has lived 80 years may incarnate sooner than the one of the other person. Discussion board of Figu, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier answered. Archive through June 30th, 2009. HTTP Pods Forum. Figu. Org CGI bin us discuss. CGI's PGG prevent topics nod one the page CGZ 1 morning scenes post for one CGR rum.
Phew. Nicole, what happens to the spirit while awaiting reincarnation?
Since the spirit exists in timelessness, you can say that it rests or slumbers in a waiting position. In that state, it can absorb off-Niemann, information from the storage banks of the overall consciousness block, formerly called comprehensive consciousness block. See http DICT. Figu. Org. Another term for that state, slumber-like state of rest. Discussion board of Figu, The Mission, Billy. Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier. Answered. Archive through August 24th, 2009.
Peter Brodowski.
My question is in regards to love or true love. If over the course of many incarnations, two spirits incarnate into bodies and these two people meet one another and say, for example, one life they are brother and sister, another life they are lovers, another they are friends, in another they are mother and daughter, etc. Is there some kind of bond or love that grows stronger, where perhaps the two spirits are more or less determined to always come together, and that perhaps at a certain point when these two are able to recall the past incarnations or view future ones, that these individuals would make the conscious effort to reunite again and again? Or perhaps I should put it this way. If one has the ability to find out whether or not a person was their wife or husband, etc. in previous lives, and there was existing love between them, would it be from a spiritual viewpoint, advisable course of action to take, to seek to continue and strengthen that bond between two spirits? Is there something you can perhaps state that may give me some valuable insight in regards to this idea?
Since personalities serve that which makes a person and individual with a certain name and thinking, etc., do never incarnate again, but are dissolved after death. It is not relevant whether two spirit forms, or rather the connected personalities, have been in some interaction in former existences. Relationships, marriages, and parent-child relations in this life are entirely non-relevant in future lives, because each life has to deal with new people, relationships, and circumstances. Discussion board of Figu, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier answered. Archive through August 24th, 2009.
Save. Oh. Thanks for your previous answer in confirming that it is universal. A spirit form will incarnate into the embryo on the 21st or 22nd day after fertilization. As the length of the day will be different from planet to planet, say on Earth, it will be 24 hours, x 21 days, 504 hours. On planet A, it will be 36 hours, x 21 days, shark 756 hours. On planet B, it will be 90 hours, x 21 days. For 1890 hours. My question is, does it mean that the time in hours before the incarnation of a spirit form will be a very much different from planet to planet?
No. This has to do with the distance between the planet and its sun, plus several other factors, like the way of life, etc. Discussion board of Phi Gu, the mission. Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier. Answered. Archive through August 24th, 2009. Carol Steve.
On the subject of reincarnation, I'm trying to understand it in more depth. For example, if a person who is born into this lifetime comes into a very hard life, such as being born into a family where they suffered neglect, physical abuse, humiliation, poverty, and having to deal with uncaring or drug-addicted parents, chooses to rise above this and lead a decent life. How did the previous life determine personality and circumstances in this present lifetime? And how does the lifetime being experienced now and how it is lived determine the next incarnation? I am looking for a specific example using the above scenario so that I can understand the reincarnation process and how all this is all determined.
There is no influence from a former life, and there is no influence on a future life. Each life must be taken as an independent unit, led by a new and unburdened personality. Discussion board of Phi Gu, the mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier. Answered. Archive through September 27th, 2009.
Savit. Oh! Thanks for the answers towards the incarnation of a spirit form into an embryo. It was mentioned that it is universal for a spirit form to incarnate into the embryo on the 21st or 22nd day after fertilization.
Yes. This applies for all hominid life forms, crustor human beings on all planets in the universe.
Savi. Oh. It was also mentioned that this has to do with the distance between the planet and its sun, plus several other factors.
No, this refers to the time span of the life, live, and the after death in the beyond life periods only, the ratio between the time alive and the time in the beyond. Discussion board of Phi Gu, the mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier. Answered. Archive through September 27th, 2009. Lonnie Mordo.
Are spirit forms usually part of a collective, except during this time of overpopulation on Earth? In other words, if the population was closer to normal, would we be our grandparents, or great-grandparents, and so on? It is my understanding that this is how it normally works. And because of overpopulation, or other factors, some ET spirit forms have been born to Earth spirit parents, or out of their collective, if there is such a thing. Please clarify or correct me if I am wrong.
You are confusing things. Spirit forms are always a collective, a we form, just as the human beings on Earth are as humankind. Overpopulation has an effect only on the duration of the time between two incarnations. Questions. How can we be our grandparents when they are still alive? Each personality is unique and will never be incarnated again. Therefore, nobody can incarnate as such and such. Discussion board of Phi Gu, the mission, Billy. Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier. Answered. Archive through November 29th, 2009. Lonnie Morto.
Or as in my previous question when I asked if spirit forms are part of a collective or we form, what I meant was if it wasn't for overpopulation, would spirit forms which are part of a we form incarnate as our great-great-grandparents in previous generations? It is my understanding that because of overpopulation it is not like this anymore, that spirit forms incarnate into a different family that is not part of the same we form. Please explain, if you would, the circumstances that determines the incarnation lineage of spirit forms that are part of a we form. Under what circumstances do they incarnate in the same family, many generations apart, of course?
Incarnation. In the same family is a rare exception and not the rule, because there are no familiar bonds over incarnations. Family bonds don't play a role in the incarnation laws. Discussion Board of FIGU, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive through March 01, 2010.
Matt? My question relates to reincarnation. I have come to understand through various sources that the Pleiaren and yourself know for sure that reincarnation is a fact. I would like you to expound on the method of how this is known as fact. Is it proven through the use of spiritual or consciousness abilities? Or do the Pleiaren have technology that allows them to know, or both? Please explain this, as this is a point that comes up in my discussion with others very often.
Incarnation is a fact, and this is proven by the fact that you can follow back into your own former incarnations, if you have the ability to do so. This can be done via the storage banks. Note by Christian Freiner. Besides, it would be absolutely illogical and unjust if a person would incarnate, live only once, and then either disappear into oblivion, nirvana, or into a heaven up in the clouds to smell God's feet, or settle down into hell where one must enjoy the warmth of eternal fire for all eternity. Our universe cannot having been built upon the tiniest amount of illogic, because else it would not have become existent. Discussion Board of FIGU, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive through July 23, 2010.
Hector. Oh yeah, Ash, in recent weeks I've been thinking about the so-called storage banks and how they support backup human evolution. If I'm not wrong, there exist universal, galactic and planetary storage banks where all kind of personal and collective knowledge is saved. Quite often has occurred and will continue to occur that space travelers have accidents with their spaceships, and from that moment on they shall reincarnate in a different planet or civilization. It comes to my mind the case of the Bardans Tunguska, 1917. My question is, will those stranded space travelers like the Bardans in Tunguska feel like strange, disoriented, out of place, not integrated in their new planet's first incarnation, because their reference system about civilization's habits and rules is completely different? Something similar had to happen to the old Lyrans and Vegans. But those Lyrans and Vegans have had so many reincarnations on Earth that they do not feel strange on Earth, but familiar, and even consider themselves an Earth human in all aspects. Again, the question, when incarnating for the first time on a different planet, do human beings feel out of place because they have no experiences in that planet? They have not stored a single experience, thought, feeling in their new planetary storage banks?
No. If a rather highly evolved human being dies on another planet, his next consciousness block is adjusted to the level on that planet. In the case of the Bardans, or their spirit forms respectively, they will incarnate in the highest possible cultural area on the planet. The consciousness block is always adjusted to the evolutionary level of a population on a planet. A person could not exist if the gap or difference is too large. Discussion Board of FIGU, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive through October 25, 2010.
Yo! Billy, why does the spirit of the human being has to stay in the fine matter world for 152 years? And is this based only when a planet has a human population of approximately 500 million?
This is a proportional number only, and means that if a person lives 100 years, the duration in the fine matter world would last 152 years if there is no overpopulation on this planet. Note by Christian Freiner. This number of 152 is connected to planet Earth and does differ from planets in other solar systems. Discussion board of FIGU, the mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive through October 25, 2010.
Marcel. I have a question about the evolution of the spirit. When a scientist dies in the middle of the jungle, his or her spirit will travel back to the culture, which is more suited to continue its evolution. Then I was wondering, is the spirit of a human attracted by the vibration of the spirits of their parents, or the mother, so that the spirit is born from parents that are evolved as well? Or does the reincarnation of the spirit happen in a complete random way, but within the same culture?
The parents have no influence on the attraction of a spirit form into the embryo. Everything is occurring fügungsmäßig. The spirit form does incarnate into a region culture where there is a similar average level of evolution to its own. Discussion board of FIGU, the mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive through November 29, 2010.
Perfecto. Hi, Billy, we all know the problems overpopulation is causing to our planet. I imagine that overpopulation causes not only problems in this material dimension, where people incarnate in material bodies D-states, but also in the beyond gen states. What I would like to know is if there can appear negative consequences to our next personality, if due to overpopulation, instead of staying in the beyond, say 152 years, we stay a mere 1 or 5 years. I came to this conclusion after thinking that the material realm and the beyond are two different manifestations of the same reality. So, if overpopulation does provoke all kind of negative consequences in the material realm, it should also provoke negative consequences in the beyond. Does a very short stay permanence in the beyond imply or result in negative, unfavorable living conditions for our next personalities? How does overpopulation affect the processes taking place in the beyond?
If a spirit form is forced to reincarnate too soon, the overall consciousness block had not enough time to fully program the new personality. As a result, there are human beings born who have great problems to get firm ground under their feet, or in other words, to live into their life. Other effects are weakness, non-thawness, instability, etc. Discussion board of FIGU, the mission, Billy. Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive through April 25th, 2011.
Show!
Billy, how does the spirit review its last incarnation when it is in the fine matter world?
The spirit form does not review its last reincarnation, as BTW is also the case with the former consciousness block because it has ceased to exist and has been dissolved into pure energy. Discussion board of FIGU, the mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive through October 01, 2011.
Hey, Marmovi. If any humans from another world came to Earth, lived and died here, it means their spirit form would be bound to Earth, and their next incarnation would be on Earth. Now, if they are spiritually more developed than humans on Earth, let's say 1,000 to 2,000 years, does that mean that their spirit forms would stay in the beyond for a longer time, until the majority of humans on Earth have reached similar or close spiritual development level?
This has already happened on Earth, for example, when the Lyrians came to this planet and died here. They just joined the spirit forms of the original Earth humans. They had not to wait for the Earth humans to catch up. The effect of an extraterrestrial spirit form is automatically blocked when it reincarnates on a foreign planet where the average evolutionary level of the people is lower. But of course, there remains an influence to the effect that the person with the ET spirit form shows a somewhat higher level of evolution in the material life. Discussion board of FIGU, the mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive through October 01, 2011.
Cleve. By doing a search for answers, I've learnt that the spirit generally has no recollection of its former lives. My question is, when we are reincarnated, many possibly thousands or millions times over, is it possible that we can link or meet again, live our lives, meet again with any form of physical family or friends that we've encountered in our previous lifetimes, although we have no memories of it? If that's the case, why is it for a learning process? To the individuals, do we reincarnate as the same group or people to meet again? I ask, as you said, that we generally are reincarnated into the same planet, country, or was it culture, that we were born.
Yes, that's possible, but not the rule. The spirit form reincarnates because of the learning process. This is generally so, and also so if there may be a case when two spirit forms have been reincarnated in two persons who are related to each other at that time, and who, as other personalities, had been related before. Discussion Board of Figu, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive through November 26, 2011.
Hamir. A question concerning the number of reincarnations a spirit form undertakes during its development. You have previously stated that once a spirit form reaches the High Council's semi-spirit level, which might occur after 60 to 80 million years of material reincarnations, then no more reincarnations take place, and a spirit form at that level will gradually evolve and transform into the first level of pure spirit form Arahat Athasatam. The question concerns the first 60 to 80 million years of material reincarnations occurring on various planets. Let's take a low average of 60 years per material life, then 90 years in the beyond between lives, making 150 years per reincarnation as an example. Then we must consider if it's actually possible for that to occur continuously in an unbroken series. And for that to occur, there must be a sufficient living population on the planet to facilitate this. With approximately 127 billion spirit forms assigned to this planet waiting in the queue, it would take an extremely long time, given the up to now relatively low population levels for each one, to continuously reincarnate within the parameters of the cycle. Most human spirit forms are less than 1.5 million years old, which indicates by the mathematics that they may have had 10,000 reincarnations at most. Most humans are not hulking brutes or grunting club-swinging Neanderthals, though a few with that type of mentality manage to become political and religious leaders somehow, but that's beside the point. Indigenous Earth spirits who started reincarnating at the very start 4.5 million years ago might have had 30,000 reincarnations at most. Then the few spirit forms of extraterrestrial origin who died here are obviously older. The mathematics. 150 years, reincarnation. 1,500 years that, then reincarnations. 50 years, 100 reincarnations. 150 southern years, 1,000 reincarnations. 5 million years, 10,000 reincarnations. 15 million years, 100,000 reincarnations. 60 million years, 400,000 reincarnations. 75 million years, 500,000 reincarnations. So by the mathematics, if an average age of 60 years, material life is maintained, and that's probably not correct, as advanced populations can live to 1,000 years and beyond, then logically, how many reincarnations can fit into 60 to 80 million years? On average, it would probably be less than 500,000, yet Simyar, Say and Patar have both stated in contact reports billions. Even if those were mistranslations or misinterpretations, and they really said millions even, that doesn't fit mathematically. So what exactly could it be? How many reincarnations? If the actual linear time requirement for material reincarnations was 60 to 80 billion years, then some millions of reincarnations would indeed be possible, using those mathematical calculations, but you have stated it's 60 to 80 million years of material reincarnations, and no more after the semi-spirit level. Can you finally lay this issue to rest and explain how it works? Out of all the material I've read so far, it's the only unexplainable anomaly, though how a spirit form, which enlivens a human body, can visit itself via time travel into the past or future is also another difficult concept to grasp. But that's another question.
You cannot take an average to calculate the amount of lifetimes. The higher evolved a person is, the longer he lives. There are lives of less than 1 year, and there are lives longer than 1,000 years. And a person who fulfills his reincarnation cycle within 40 million years will have to use less incarnations than a person who needs 60 million years to get rid of his material body. All of this depends on the motivation, the learning, and the evolution of the individual. Regarding Ta and Simyase speaking of billions of years, they spoke of humanity as a whole, collective, and not an individual. When they are talking about Mensch der Erde oder der Erdenmensch, they mean humanity as a whole. Discussion board of FIGU, the mission. Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier. Answered. Archive through November 26, 2011.
Abbau.
But I just have a question and I hope you can answer it for me. I'm slowly reading Decalogue Dodecalogue as my German is not too good yet. And verse number 459 on page 59 says, "Yet without compliance in the laws and recommendations of the creation, this is not possible, because when the awake time of the creation must give way to the time of slumber, and you haven't in this time fulfilled your purpose of perfection and returning to the creation, then you fell victim to Totsen for all great times in an absolute elimination." Can you explain to me what this means, please? How can the spirit form fall victim to an absolute elimination?
You shall not take this literally because it is just a if. In reality, this will not be the case because no spirit form will be left back. Each spirit form will reach the level of Arahat Atharsata and upwards. Note by Christian Freiner. Some stubborn and lazy people need 60 million years. Others need 40 million years only to reach the level of the High Council. It looks like some individuals are in need of einem Klapf mit der Geißel, as we say in Switzerland. Discussion board of FIGU, the mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive through December 24th, 2011.
Red pill. Lutz, in one of your previous answers, you said that David Wilcock is no Edgar Casey. Since we know personalities do not reincarnate but the spirit form does, we can assume that your answer means the spirit form of the two are not the same. If not, please elaborate. My question is, which source was this confirmation from?
Just by thinking logically. If Edgar Casey really had a more than average evolved spirit form, there would be the requirement of a longer time span to exist in the realm of the other world Yenseats, in order to digest and to build up the new consciousness block. Discussion board of FIGU, the mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive through December 24th, 2011.
So, Billy, can you please, if possible, explain to me how did the Pleiaren come to the conclusion that on Earth the human spirit or spirit forms has to stay the duration it was, in the coarse matter world multiplied by about 1.5 times in the fine matter world? I mean, how is this calculated?
The ratio between the duration to exist in the realm of the other world beyond and the actual life is depending on the distance between a planet and its sun. This is a law of creation and is working normally when there is no overpopulation on a planet. Discussion board of FIGU, the mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive through December 24th, 2011.
Imamovi. After death, it takes about 1.5 times the lifespan of a human to incarnate once again into the material life. During the time in the Bond, The actual time on Earth is different then, in the beyond dimension. What would be the exact ratio of the time here and the time there, if there is a measurable time in the beyond?
In the so-called beyond realm of the other world, there is no time calculation, because that realm is timeless. There are no watches in the beyond. Discussion board of FIGU, the mission, Billy, Edgeworth Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered, archive through December 24th, 2011.
Cool. We all know that religion has about 800 years left on this planet. I also know that 4 or 5 of Earth humanity suffers from Gotteswahnglaube, Gotteswahn und Gotteswahnkrankheit. I've been reading your books Kelch der Wahrheit, and so many others, and striving for my personal evolution for some years now, and will continue to do so until the end of my days, or I run out of books. My question is, do you think I can, in my future incarnations, I can avoid being born into a religious family? Or if that is not possible, do you think I could draw on my impulses from the storage banks to break my consciousness free from the religious enslavement of religion? In my future incarnations, I wish to break free so I can find out about the mission. Study again and live my future incarnations with Wahrheit, Wissen, Weisheit, Liebe, Freiheit, Frieden, and harmony.
In about 800 years from now, a greater number of people will begin to think about reality and getting away from religious belief. In your case, and in the case of everyone, there is no guarantee that your spirit form will be born into a non-religious family. This, however, is no obstacle, as several examples of FIGU members prove who were capable to detach themselves from the religious upbringing in religious families. Each person with his personality must find his way anew in each incarnation to find the truth in reality. Discussion board of FIGU, the mission, Billy, Edgeworth Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive through January 28th, 2012.
Ebior. Oh wait, do baby spirits choose their parents, or maybe friends, before they enter into this world? Or is it random? The reason I ask is because of traits or characteristics learned.
No, they don't. It's not random in the sense that human beings understand the term. It's a Fügung, an application of the law of cause and effect, through the creational laws. It's the same principle as insemination procreation. Discussion board of FIGU, the mission, Billy, Edgeworth Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive through January 28th, 2012.
Joe? Hey, how do we know that reincarnation really exists? I still find it difficult to understand why we are here. There has to be more to it. Are we missing something important?
If there was no reincarnation of the spirit form and the evolving overall consciousness block, which creates a new consciousness block for each new life, Earth or any other planet would be populated by idiots only who had no higher knowledge and could not accomplish anything. There would be no progress, no knowledge, no wisdom, etc. Reincarnation is an evolutionary process which enables and secures the storage of knowledge that can be used and based upon in the next lives. This, in turn, makes it possible that the human being can evolve consciousness-related. Discussion board of FIGU, the mission, Billy, Edgeworth Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive through March 26, 2012.
Jaco. B. My thoughts about the transition of a very highly developed human into the High Council are that the transition occurs after physical death. The spirit and its overall consciousness block, and a fine elemental body move over into the level of the High Council, where it stays in an ever-increasingly finer form until entry into the level Arahatasata. Can you shed your light on this?
There's no sense going into details because you cannot make use of it anyway. What matters is how life's values are implemented into one's own life. What can be said regarding the transition process from the material world via level of High Council to Arahat Athersata? It's an automatism. depending on a person's and his descendant personalities, efforts and intelligence, etc. The process to gain entrance into the High Council realm encompasses between 40 and 60 million years. Based on the 60 million, it takes an average of 18 million years incarnated as a human being, and 42 million years in the Jenseitsbereich other world. Discussion Board of Figu, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive through October 28, 2012.
Peel. I have an only 18-year-old son with special needs in the area of communication. He feels very wise and has led us down the path to finding your spiritual teachings. He feels like an old spirit, for lack of a better description. Yet I have been told that the spirit form of children with special needs are new and young spirits who are just beginning their learning phase. Please help me understand if and how the spirit form of children with special needs are different.
There are no new spirits or spirit forms anymore here on Earth. Your son's problem has nothing to do with the spirit form, but with the consciousness and the psyche. Note by Christian Freiner, and probably a malfunctioning brain or some other physical malfunction may also play a role. All human beings who live on our planet have a spirit form that has already incarnated many times. Discussion Board of Figu, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive through October 28, 2012.
Marcel. I was discussing with some friends about the first spirit form incarnating in a human body for the first time, and we know that from that point on, the human must learn from nature, its laws to procure the evolution of the spirit form. From this learning process, the human gathers knowledge in the spirit form for the future reincarnations. Or does the spirit form contain all knowledge from the beginning of its creation, and the human simply matches or compares knowledge through experiencing life? In other words, is the spirit form empty when reincarnating for the first time? Or does it contain all knowledge that is not available to us, but only through living many lives?
When the human spirit form enters a human body for the first time, it is neutral and has no knowledge. During the following reincarnations, knowledge is fed through the material consciousness via thoughts and feelings. Discussion Board of Figu, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive through July 27, 2013.
Aditi. A. Regarding evolution and wisdom, upon death the knowledge gained by a human being is passed on to his or her next incarnation as wisdom. Question. Can you better explain this statement with an example? Even a basic example would do to understand it better.
Upon death, knowledge and wisdom are stored in the storage banks. That knowledge, and its essence wisdom, are continually released in a next existence, Panchensa's next life. This ensures that in an actual life, information, sure knowledge from previous existences can be used again and built on, which guarantees a steady evolution. Note by Christian Freiner. This means that during one's lifetime, impulses are appearing in one's consciousness, which can, but must not be, detected and then used to gain further knowledge. Discussion Board of Figu, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archive through July 27, 2013.
The Red Pill. It was suggested that children under the age of 5 often connect with their past lives in some capacity that is unclear to me. This may suggest a connection to why most people cannot remember what happened before the age of 5. There was a researcher, Ian Stevenson of the University of Virginia, who dedicated himself to the study of reincarnation cases of only children. Many of the documented cases do corroborate with your information. The reason I mention this is because it is abundantly clear that the majority of people following your information is interested in this, myself included. Now, my question then has to do with what was exchanged on the English Figu forum, where it was said by yourself that language, being culturally tied, is a factor in the spirit form's re-entry to the next physical body. What I would like is a more clearly stated set of conditions. That's my question. Here are just some things I contemplated on. They are not questions, but hopefully you can tie your answer to clarify this central question concerning the role of language culture in the process governing reincarnation, when a planet such as Earth is freshly populated, with new physical human forms where no language existed, when a family that is bilingual and more, when a person is bilingual and more, when spirit form has a vibrational match with expecting parents on the other side of the planet that is of the same language, culture, or different, when a spirit form has remained in the fine matter world for much longer than the average wait time for re-entry, like 5 times the normal cycle of rebirth due to region cultural binds, when a person dies before living a full life. But there is a documented case of one person having reincarnated 2 more times in the same family due to murder for a total of 3 personalities in one family's lifetime. This is clearly within the guideline of language culture. In a previous answer you gave to another, it was mentioned that spirit form that physically died in free space would go to the nearest planet and how this ties to language cultural selection.
Language is not a factor regarding the reincarnation of a spirit form into a certain embryo. It's the cultural consciousness-based factors which are decisive for the location of a reincarnation. What matters is the existing level of evolution consciousness-based at the time of a person's death. Note by Christian Friener turns an example, the spirit form of a Swiss person who lived here all life, or a part of it, and is used to the way of thinking and the culture and level of knowledge, etc., etc. In Switzerland, will reincarnate in Europe again, but not necessarily, but probably also in Austria or Germany or France, etc., where a similar level of consciousness-based culture and way of life, etc., etc., exists. If a person from, for example, Afghanistan, migrates to Switzerland or Germany, etc., lives the rest of his or her life here and gets used to the way of thinking, the traditions, the culture in the center countries of Europe, learns the language, etc., then the spirit form of that person may reincarnate in Europe in a next existence, and not again in Afghanistan or Pakistan or India, etc. If in a family of immigrants in Switzerland there's a family member who does only live within his or her family, does not learn German or French, etc., does only watch TV programs from his or her homeland, then such a person's spirit form will reincarnate in his or her original homeland or surrounding countries' cultures. Discussion Board of Figu, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archived through October 27, 2013, Indy for Derek.
My question is, in regard to reincarnation, whether it be special love bonds between spouses or deep family bonds, or the most evolution in certain geographical places, how does the spirit form of the human being designate where and through whom it reincarnates? What factors play a role and why?
The spirit form does not designate. Quite to the contrary, it is designated according to creational laws. Billy does not know how this works, but of course, everything depends on Schwingungen swinging waves. Discussion Board of Figu, The Mission, Billy Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archived through March 23, 2014.
Savvy. Oh, I refer to the spirit form of androids. It was mentioned that androids are enlivened by an artificially created spirit form. That is to say, they have no amendment spirit form. My question is, would these artificially created spirit form also observe the creative natural laws of reincarnation?
Omidam is the word. The android spirit forms are also capable of reincarnation, but not as human beings, but only as androids with android consciousness forms. Discussion board of Figu, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archived through April 29th, 2014.
Marba.
Oh. Tar said the impulses left by the buffer will affect people on this planet for several hundred more years. Now every time I think about the Buffath, I get very angry, and I will never get over it. Now my question, Billy, can the Andromedan High Council or Arahat Athasata get rid of the residual impulses left by the Bephoth? Can you please explain?
Basically, such impulses are stored personality-based Persönlichkeitsmäßig, and will hit influence only the new personality in a next reincarnation of the spirit form in question. This means that terrestrial human beings will not be hit by these residual impulses. Anyone who lives, thinks, feels, and acts according to the creational laws and recommendations will not get into such swinging waves, Schwingungen, and therefore will not be affected. Note by Christian Freiner. People who are reading information like the one about the impulses and the Baphaths should avoid creating confusion and emotions, like fear, hate, etc. But keep in mind one of the basic principles of the spiritual teaching, namely that controlling one's thoughts is the main thing and focus where the human being more or less decides about his or her life and destiny, etc., and can develop kind of a protection against external negative influences, etc. Discussion board of Figu, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archived through August 26, 2014. Matla.
My question is once the spirit enters the embryo. On the 21st day, how long into the pregnancy, does the fetus have to be before it can interact with the parents, even just at a subconscious and unconscious level, with the stimulus that the parents provide for him or her, whether in thoughts, voice, sound, feelings, or touch?
During pregnancy, it is a one-way process from the mother and father, etc., to the fetus. That is to say, the fetus only receives. This happens unconsciously and non-consciously. These outside impulses are building the Grundcharakter, basic character, followed by the Erziehungs- and Selbsterziehungscharachter, educational and self-educational character. Discussion board of Figu, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archived through October 28, 2014 to Matla.
Even before a child is born and is gestating in the mother's womb, would talking aloud the spiritual teachings to the child help improve and train certain abilities of the child, which would enhance his or her chance at a spiritual life when born?
What matters is how and what the mother is thinking and how she is building up her psyche. Her way of thinking, etc., is transferred as impulses to the unborn child. Note by Christian Freiner. It is not required that the mother reads the spiritual teaching aloud. What matters is that she lives according to the spiritual natural laws and recommendations. Discussion board of Figu, The Mission, Billy, Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier, answered. Archived through November 24, 2014.
Marcel. Okay, now that we know what happens after we die, I have no longer any fear related to the passing from this world to the other. However, lately I've been developing some concerns about reincarnating in such terrible conditions on this planet. My life right is very good, and the thought of reincarnating to bad parents has me very worried sometimes. What would you recommend me and us to do in order to accept this inevitable fate? Thank you truly for your time and patience.
Since your next personality will not remember this actual lifetime, there's absolutely no need to worry. You cannot influence your next life from the actual life. However, what you can do now is to make the best out of this life. That is to say, live according to the creational natural laws as good as possible. Note by Christian Freiner. Just as it is, or has been the case in this life, where you were able to achieve a good life, the same is possible again in next existences. What you learn in this life will or may bring you some benefit in your next personality's existence. Discussion board of Figu, The Mission, Billy. Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier. Answered. Archive through March 01, 2015.
Rish. Hi. Since the population on Earth is growing at such rapid pace, I was wondering if all the spirit form that take birth on Earth had previous births on Earth, or could there be new or otherworldly spirits with no previous births on Earth? I know each spirit form is bound to take birth on the planet where he died, but since the current population is 7BN, and there haven't been so many people on Earth before, so I wanted to know if that's possible.
There's no need to activate new spirit forms on Earth, because already 129 milliard billion, according to Arahat Athersada's information, spirit forms have at least once been activated, incarnated, reincarnated. However, most of them are inactive. Discussion board of Figu, The Mission, Billy. Edward Albert Meier. Your questions to Billy Meier. Answered. Archive through March 01, 2015.
Die! Does one spirit form always incarnate in the same astrological sign of the zodiac?
No.